What's going on, everyone? Brian here from Native Instruments. In this walkthrough, I'll be creating two different styles of music just using instruments and effects available in 360 Pro. With the Pro tier, you still get all of the same instruments and effects from the Essential and the Plus tier, but for this example, we'll just be sticking with the Pro exclusive instruments. One style of music I'll write is more cinematic, using instruments like Lors and Arkhis, while the other one is going to be more classical or orchestral, sticking with a traditional orchestral layout of strings, brass, woodwinds, and percussion. So sit back, enjoy, and let's get creating. For this example, I'm going to be writing something orchestral. Now, I've laid out this project already, and I want to fill out the middle portion. It's organized in a way that sticks to essentially a traditional orchestral layout where I have my woodwinds, my brass, strings, and percussion. Let's take a listen to the first section that I have here, and then we'll start working on the middle. I'm going to be utilizing a lot of the same instruments over, but really using the articulation settings and trying to stick with a traditional orchestra as much as possible. The first instrument I'm going to use is Action Strings 2. This contains a lot of different patterns, and it really is going to be driving this middle section forward. Apart from all of the great patterns that are included in here, these strings just sound amazing. With this patch that I have loaded, let's listen to a few of the pattern variations. I really like this variation, but I'm going to go into the editor. From here, you can select different parts of the phrase. For example, I can select this, and I want the velocity to be a little bit more intense, so I can lower the starting velocity and the ending point. You can also change additional settings like the microphone position. You can add send effects, change EQs and reverbs. And what I'll also do is go to the settings, and I'm going to change the note release so it's a little tighter. Now that it's all dialed in, let's track it. I'm now just going to duplicate this out a couple of times. I'm going to use Action Strings 2 again, but I'm not going to be using the patterns. I love the sound of this library, so I'm just going to be creating some staccato chords. There's different playing techniques that you can select, like staccato, marcato, or just traditional sustained strings. Let's record in some chords. I'll duplicate this clip out a couple of times as well. We'll quantize the start and end point of the MIDI notes, and then we're going to consolidate it. The other thing that I want to do is basically increase the dynamics of this pattern. So I'm just going to go to modulations or CC1, choose the starting point, and then choose the end point. So as this pattern plays, it's just going to be getting louder and louder. With these last two instruments, these were very specific libraries. Now, for the other instruments that I have violin 1, 2, viola, cello, and basses. And for these, I'm using the Symphony series string ensemble. I'm a huge fan of using this library as all of the strings and also the other ones, the brass and the percussion, they just sound really full and really clean. Now, there's tons of different articulation settings that you can also select from. With staccato, you can also turn on repetition. You can change the rate of the repetition, and which beats are getting the accent. I'm going to layer some additional notes on top of the staccato chords just to make it sound a little bit more impactful. I'll duplicate this out just like I did with the other instruments, and then what I'll do is copy over this MIDI onto the cello line. I want the cello to play the same notes, but just down an octave. Since the viola line is playing starting around C3, I'm just going to select the MIDI notes and drop them down an octave. In the mixer settings, you can adjust things like microphone position, EQ settings, and change the type of reverb. In the setup, this is going to be how many violins are playing. I don't want the entire violin section to play, but just violin 2. We'll stick with this for right now for the strings, but we'll add some more later. The next thing I want to do is add some driving percussion to really mirror the movement of the strings that we started with. I can select from different drum ensembles using this drop down in the top right. Similar to the Action Strings library, there's also tons of different patterns that I can choose from. There's a lot of different slots, so currently there's a couple I have selected, but I can always go to the tab below and just start adding different types of patterns. If I want to customize the sound of this instrument a little bit more, I can always go to the mixer page and dial in some settings, or I can also adjust certain settings in the playback section like the tempo, or if I want to give it some more feel, I can increase the swing amount. The next thing I want to add is a bass drum from the Symphony series percussion library. There's different types of articulations that I can choose from basic hits to rolls to crescendos. And basically, I'm just going to be using hits to emphasize the downbeats of each bar. I'm now going to be using the snare sound from the same Symphony series, the percussion library, and I want to basically be creating this kind of marching feel using individual snare hits as well as rolls. Now that I've recorded that pattern, I'm just going to quantize the notes and duplicate it to the same length as the other percussion elements. We have some string elements and some percussion, so I want to start adding some brass. I'm also going to be using the Symphony series, the brass ensemble library, and I have a trombone loaded. There's tons of different articulations to choose from, like sforzando. When you load the library, there's already a bunch of articulations available in the slots, but you can always swap these out. If you want to have a library of more staccato sounding articulations, you can always swap them for something else. I'm going to go back and use this sforzando articulation and use this on the downbeats for two areas. In addition to the trombone having this sforzando, I'm going to duplicate this and have the tuba patch play the same thing. I'll copy both the trombone and the tuba and move it over to another bar just to emphasize a transition point in this pattern. Now that we have all this excitement, I want this to lead to the violin one playing the main melody. With this melody, I'm going to turn on legato. Basically what this does is, based on the velocity that I press the key, it's either going to have a legato slur between certain notes, or it's just going to be disconnected. This knob dictates how quickly the notes glide between one another. This slider here dictates at what point or at what velocity does the legato patch become enabled. Now that the patch is dialed in, let's track in the main melody for the climactic moment of this middle section. To really emphasize this climactic moment, I'm going to duplicate the violin 1 part and move this to violin 2. It's basically doubling this, just making it more impactful. Now that the main melody is recorded, we'll start adding additional elements like the cello to really fill in the low end of the string section. To fill in the low end of the string section, typically the cello and the basses are playing the same notes just an octave apart. If they're playing different notes, it can start to sound a little muddy, so I'm just going to copy the cello part over to the bass. Lastly, we'll have the violas play a chord. With auto divisi selected or enabled, basically the 12 violas in this ensemble are going to be evenly split so that 4 of them are going to be taking each one of the notes in the chord. I want to have the trombone and tuba play the same melodic phrase that the cello and basses are playing, so I'm just going to copy over the MIDI onto those tracks. Leading up to the ending of this section, I'm going to record in a trombone line that kind of builds into this final moment. We'll do the same thing, but now for the tuba. To really emphasize this buildup, I'm going to create a multi inside of Contact. I'll first load up the trombones. To create the multi, I'll go to the instrument navigator in the top left and click the empty slot. Next, I'll select in the browser the brass ensemble library, but this time I'm going to load up the French horns. In the instrument navigator in the top left, it's now easier to mute and solo the different instruments, adjust panning, and bounce the levels. Now that these elements are balanced, I want to add one more instrument, and I'm going to be using the Symphony series string ensemble. While the trombones and French horns are going to be playing sustained notes in this multi, I'm going to be using the string ensemble's repetition feature to basically give this more movement. We'll change this to 16th notes to make it faster. I'll just adjust the levels of these different instruments just to make sure that it sounds cohesive. With that final sustained note of this phrase, I'm just going to adjust the automation so that it gradually fades out. I'm going to be using the crash cymbal from the percussion library, and there's different articulations that you can use and different types of cymbal effects. The last section of an orchestra that we can't forget about are the woodwinds, and I'll be using the Symphony series woodwind ensemble. We'll first record in some flutes and go through the different articulations that are available. Enabling arpeggio allows you to play different types of patterns. I'm going to use the staccato double tongue articulation for this part. We'll just quantize the notes for this, and I want the oboes to basically be doing the same thing. To make this sound a little bit more polished, I'm going to be using Ozone 11. I'm just going to use the mastering assistant, and all I have to do is click on this icon, play the loudest part of the track, and Ozone's going to intelligently make different mastering suggestions, and it has a very easy user interface to make quick adjustments. We'll do a quick A-B comparison and make sure that we turn on gain match just so that it's not just going to sound louder, but we can really hear the difference sonically and just how much brighter it's going to sound in the high end versus the low end. Now, let's listen to the entire project from the beginning to end. Let's switch it up and go on to the next example. To start this idea, we're going to use one of my favorite instruments, Arkhis. This is all built upon organic orchestral layers. Let's listen to a few examples. I want something with a little bit more low end, so I'll go to all banks and select sub. Let's listen to a few. Arkhis is made of 3 separate layers, which you can control by using the mod wheel. I want to record something where every couple of bars, the layers get more and more complex. Next, we'll add another favorite of mine, Lores. This is also based upon layers where you have 3 separate sound sources. In addition to the main 3 sources, each one also has 3 additional layers. By clicking on it, you can see what's included. Each layer can be triggered different ways by going to mapping. For example, with this phrase, it's being triggered by a certain velocity. Anything over a value of 81 is going to trigger it. Going to the next layer, anything that's 0 to 80, that layer is going to be triggered. You can easily swap out different sounds by clicking the magnifying glass and choosing some other sound source. I want both of these to be triggered together, so I'm just going to lower the velocity so both play together. You can customize the sound further by adding motion like LFOs, or you can also change the sound of it like increasing the stereo width of the instrument. Piano Colors is a really unique piano that uses a particle engine to generate more movement. This sounds pretty good, but I'm going to turn on the particle engine here. Using the left and right arrow, I can cycle through different particle presets. If I click on particles, it brings up additional settings for the particles engine. You can change different sources like different types of mallets, for example. You can also go to the global section where you can change certain things like dynamics or adjust equalizer settings. By clicking on any of the layers, this brings up additional parameter control. For example, I can click on space and start changing different spaces or reverbs for this particular layer. My go-to instrument for any type of riser or a hit sound is rise and hit. Let's listen to a few of these examples. Using the yellow keys, these are the hits, and the purple is the rise and hit. You can also change how long the buildup is. You can change it from seconds or beats. Currently it's set to 4 beats, and what I want to do is increase this to 8. In the next section, I want to make it a little bit more dramatic and give this more movement. So I'm going to load up action strings 2. This has a high and a low strings which play different types of patterns. With each preset, there are different variations with the sound. Let's go back to the first variation. Now, if I click on Editor, this brings up additional editing controls for each individual layer. You can adjust the timing or velocity settings, and you can adjust it for the high or low strings. Currently, when I'm playing it slightly out of the range, so I'll click this button and it's going to play that last note in the phrase. Let's record it in. To give it more movement, I want to add some taiko drums, and I'm going to be using Kontact's factory library. I have the acoustic bank selected, and let's scroll down to find taikos. Triggering any of the blue keys, these are the individual drums, where the purple ones are different patterns. The low end of that first drum is a little intense, so I'm going to click on Mixer and select it, and I'm going to dial back the level a bit. There's also additional effects controls that you can select for the entire instrument. I want to roll off the low end just a little bit more, so I'm going to go to my Insert Effects, and I'm going to add Ozone's 11 EQ. You can see that it's a little strong around 50 Hertz and below, so I'm going to create a note here and just roll it off. We'll do a quick comparison and bypass the effect. Now that it sounded good, let's record it. To complement the action strings, let's load up action woodwinds. It's the same type of instrument, but woodwinds instead. By going to the settings in the top right, you can adjust things like the tempo or the playback speed. I can also adjust the note release just to make it a little bit tighter. I want to make sure that this phrase is in the key of my project. So I'm going to enable the key, and you can select the root note and what type of scale it's going to be playing. Next, I'll be using Choir Omnia. Now, there's two types of ways you can use this. There's either the keys or the sequence. In sequence mode, playing any of the blue keys is going to be triggering the sequence. You can override the phrase's articulation by using the red keys. You can also randomly choose different phrases for inspiration. Or if you have an idea of what you're looking for, you can just click the phrase here and it brings up the browser and you can choose different types of meters and all sorts of presets. From the Cremona Quartet series, let's call up Amati Viola. Now there's two presets. There's the regular one or the multi-mic, which basically gives you more microphone control. By clicking the mixer icon on the top left, this brings up the microphone mixer controls. You can adjust the balance between the close, mid, or far microphone, or even increase the room noise. There are tons of different articulations to choose from, and you can do so by clicking the three dots here. Currently, I'm on the Virtuoso, and you can switch between finger bowed or portamento. I'll now call up the Stradivari cello, which is also part of the Cremona Quartet series. I'm going to set this to Virtuoso, and I'm going to actually turn on the portamento because I want this to have a little bit of a slide to it. To finish off this section, I'm going to use the Stradivari violin. I'm just going to arrange this a little bit more and copy over the rise and hit pattern to the end, and then also add that piano line for the intro. I'm going to use that as the outro. The last thing I'll do is add Ozone 11 to the end and do a quick master. I'll use Master Assistant to start it off. I'll change the target to classical, and then I can adjust the tonal bounce so it's shaping the track to fit that EQ curve. I'll turn on gain match and do a little A/B comparison to hear what it sounds like. You can hear it cleans up the low end and it makes the top end a little bit brighter. Now I can also go under the hood and change certain things, or I can select from a wide range of presets for different use cases or different tracks. Let's listen to the finished project. As you can see with 360 Pro, there are tons of amazing and high quality instruments and effects that you have at your disposal. Again, you get everything that's in 360 Essential and the Plus tier when signing up for 360 Pro. I really hope you enjoyed the 2 musical examples I created, and give it a try for yourself for free for 14 days at nativeinstruments.com. Thanks for watching.